Hello everyone, I hope you're all well and welcome to my channel. So far, I've only uploaded my short documentaries here, and while that will probably stay the main thing that I do, I want to gradually add instructive videos such as this. Photos are a major part of my documentary work, so I thought I'd start with this short video on my approach to portrait photography, specifically in the documentary genre. There are two parts to this video. The first part is about technical tips, such as lighting or composition, and the second part focuses more on the non-technical issues, such as storytelling. I've put timestamps in the video, so feel free to simply jump ahead to any part that's more relevant to you. If you found this video interesting and helpful and would like to see more in the future, as well as more documentary content, please consider subscribing. I share my photos on social media as well, and you can find links for that in the description below. Before I share any tips, I'd like to first say a few words about definitions. There are many types of portraits, and though they can get a bit confusing at times, they can give you some guidelines and ideas. However, I personally don't like defining things, and I believe it has the potential of limiting one's creativity. I define portraits in the broadest sense of the word, meaning that if your photo puts a person or a group of people in the center of attention, I would call it a portrait. It's important for me to clarify this, as I won't get into more definitions, and you might see photos that others may not define as I do. It wouldn't be very original to say that light is what makes a good photo, but I'll say it anyway, because it simply isn't possible to stress that enough. Light is by far the most important thing in any kind of photography, not only because it is literally what makes you see what's going on, but also because it is the best tool we have for better storytelling using our photos. If you write a book, the words that you choose can tell a story in very different ways. They can express different emotions, they can create an exciting tale as well as a boring one. It's exactly the same with light. Use it in different ways to create different stories. So, tip number 1. When you reach a new place, analyze the lighting. What kind of lights are available to you? Is it sunlight, a fire, an oil lamp, or a flashlight? Maybe a combination of all of them. What direction do they come from? These are all very important questions that you should ask yourself when getting to a new scene. If you have a choice, pick the best time of the day for your portraits. If you shoot them outside, sunrise and sunset are usually the best. But if you shoot indoors and want to use a window light, for example, you might want to choose a different time. Here are a few examples. This is a fisherman from Rwanda that I documented a few months ago. I wanted to have a good portrait of him, but also wanted to see the lake and the island he lives on. I chose a time close to sunset and spent some time searching for a good location. Notice how the light comes from an angle to his face and not straight from behind him or me. That gives him more depth, and it also means I can get very nice colors for the sky in the background without having it overexposed. This photo, however, was shot indoors, and the only light I had was coming from a window. The photo was taken in the middle of the day, when the sun is stronger because I needed more light to get inside. Here the angle is closer to 90 degrees, and since there was almost no light coming from any other direction, the shadows are stronger as well. Shadows are something you need to pay attention to, and they can have a meaningful impact on your photos. In this photo, the shadows really make the scene a lot more interesting. There's a lot of contrast, so everywhere you look, it's either very dark or very bright, and that creates a special atmosphere in the photo. When shooting portraits, you can find very similar guidelines to other types of photography. The rule of thirds is a good example, which can definitely help with portraits. Putting the subject on the left or right third can create a more appealing look. However, there is absolutely no problem with placing the subject anywhere you might want, and I recommend trying as many different compositions as you can think of. Start with the safest options, with the known and simple compositions, and then get out of your comfort zone and try creative ideas that might work and might not. Look for other elements around your subject that you can include in your composition that would make it more interesting and help you tell the story better. Much like the composition, there are angles which are more known and common, and others that require some experimentation. I always recommend starting with a traditional, regular, boring angle, so that you can be sure you will have a good portrait of that person. After you do that, try other things. For example, taking pictures from above the subject, like this, is one of my favorites, and I almost always want to have a portrait from this angle. After you've tried to get creative, go even further. It doesn't matter what ideas you might have, try them. Worst case scenario, you're left with the good regular portraits that you can use, and you will have learned something in the process. Take these two kids for example. They are a brother and sister from China that I've spent some time with while working on a project in their village. Look at these examples of different angles and compositions that I've chosen. Notice how each one tells a slightly different story, even though they are the same two children. The background is as important as the subject, they say, and I agree with that statement. On the technical level, a good background will create contrast from the subject, thus highlighting them and enhancing the emotion that we want to create. The background has a major role in documentary photography. When we take what's called an environmental portrait, the environment needs to fit the story. Take a look at this, for example. These people are the staff of a small clinic in western Uganda. After documenting them inside their clinic, I wanted a different portrait, one that shows their environment and the conditions they deal with. This rural background is not something I usually associate with portraits of doctors and nurses, which makes this background even more important for a good representation of their reality. But even when taking a close-up portrait, where the background is usually blurred, the type of background and its colors would affect how well the photo tells the story. Let's move on to talk about some non-technical aspects of portrait photography and people photography in general. When you shoot a portrait, communicating with your subject is as important as the actual picture, and it will help you bring better results that everyone can be happy with. I'm talking less about portraits taken inside a studio and more about the documentary world, where these photos would be an important part of your story. Explain why you've chosen a particular place and time, and ask them for their opinion. Especially when taking someone's picture in their own environment, they will often have good ideas for places that would represent them and their story better. Getting to know them before taking pictures always helps in creating a more pleasant atmosphere. So take the time that you have to get to know your subjects better. Even if you don't have a lot of time, behave in a respectful manner. When you come across a trader in a local market that you want to photograph, take a minute or two to talk to them first. Introduce yourself and take interest in what they do. Ask them if they agree you would take their picture. The absolute worst thing that could happen is that they say no. It's true that many times we won't ask for permission because we want to capture a moment that's happening in front of us. That's completely fine. But be nice and don't treat other people like animals in the zoo. Not every photo needs to tell a story, and I think that taking a picture only because it's beautiful is a good enough reason. However, if you are looking for a story, use the portrait for that purpose. I usually try to find the balance between a portrait that would create an emotional response and a portrait that is able to tell me more about the subject. The correct combination creates a portrait that tells a story, teaches the viewer something new, and at the same time creates an emotional response that connects the viewer with the subject. I'd be willing to sacrifice the perfect light or the most interesting angle if it means that the portrait, though not technically perfect, would tell the story better. This is one of my favorite photos. I shot it with my first beginner-level camera and a very bad lens. I'm mentioning this because if you zoom in a little bit, you'd definitely be able to notice some technical issues with the photo. But in terms of storytelling, it remains one of my best photos. You see a part of the kid's environment. You see him in action, wearing a school uniform, which teaches you something about his life. And you can notice his expression and motion, which could make the viewer connect with him better. It might not be technically perfect, but it tells the story right. There is a lot more to be said about portraits, and I might talk about it some more in a future video, but this is where I'll stop for this one. If you have any thoughts about anything I've talked about, please share them in the comments below. Stay tuned for another short documentary coming soon, and thank you for your time.